You're listening to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, created to help you succeed in your educational journey. Learn more at baremetalcyber.com, where additional prepcasts, books, and training materials await. Let's get started. Collective ownership is the practice of treating outcomes, quality, and operability as shared responsibilities rather than individual silos. In agile teams, this orientation transforms separate contributions into dependable end-to-end value. Instead of optimizing one's own piece of the puzzle, team members hold themselves and each other accountable for the whole product experience. This shared responsibility reduces bottlenecks, improves resilience, and ensures that decisions are aligned to integrated value rather than local convenience. Collective ownership also builds stronger culture, because people feel connected to a common purpose rather than isolated in narrow roles. It shifts the language from my task to our outcome, emphasizing collaboration over territory. By normalizing shared responsibility, teams eliminate handoffs, accelerate learning, and produce work that is more reliable in production. Collective ownership is not just a practice but a mindset one that turns groups of specialists into cohesive, resilient teams. The definition of collective ownership centers on the idea that teams are accountable for outcomes rather than narrow components. Instead of measuring success by whether one person finished a task, success is judged by whether the entire product slice delivered value. This orientation reduces the need for handoffs between specialists, as team members collaborate more broadly across boundaries. For example, rather than a developer completing code and throwing it over the wall to testers, both roles work together to ensure the feature is functional and valuable. This reduces misalignment and prevents issues from being discovered late. Collective ownership redefines accountability as collective rather than individual, anchoring effort to integrated value. It ensures that progress is measured not by isolated outputs, but by end-to-end results that matter to customers and stakeholders. This shift is fundamental for agile delivery, where adaptability and cohesion outweigh rigid role boundaries. Shared vision and objectives provide the anchor that keeps collective ownership coherent. Without a common target, individuals may optimize their own parts in ways that unintentionally harm the whole. By aligning everyone around clear goals and objectives, teams ensure that trade-offs are made in service of the larger purpose. For instance, a shared objective to reduce onboarding time ensures that developers, designers, and support staff align their work toward the same outcome, rather than pursuing isolated improvements. This shared purpose provides clarity during moments of ambiguity, enabling faster decisions that reflect collective priorities. It also builds motivation, as individuals see how their contributions tie into something meaningful beyond their immediate tasks. A shared vision transforms potential conflicts into opportunities for collaboration, because disagreements can be resolved by asking which option best serves the overall goal. In this way, vision and objectives make ownership collective, rather than fragmented. A single source of truth is critical for sustaining collective ownership. By consolidating backlogs, decisions, and metrics into shared artifacts, teams ensure that everyone operates from the same reality. This prevents the confusion and mistrust that arise when different members rely on conflicting information from separate channels. For example, a centralized backlog clarifies priorities for all, while a shared decision log ensures that the rationale for past choices is accessible. Metrics dashboards make progress visible, reducing reliance on subjective reports. A single source of truth accelerates correction because discrepancies are spotted quickly and addressed collectively. It also strengthens trust, as transparency demonstrates that nothing is being hidden or manipulated. By grounding collaboration in shared evidence, teams build consistency in their decisions and accountability in their outcomes. A unified truth reduces politics and speculation, reinforcing that success is measured by the team, not by individuals. Cross-skilling forms one of the foundations of collective ownership. When individuals have breadth in addition to depth, teams can adapt to shifting priorities and cover for one another when staffing changes or absences occur. Cross-skilling lowers bottlenecks by ensuring that no critical skill is limited to a single person. For example, if multiple developers can also perform testing, The team avoids stalls when testing demand spikes. This flexibility sustains flow, as work continues even under disruption. Cross-skilling also deepens empathy, as team members gain appreciation for the challenges of neighboring roles. This reduces conflict and promotes more thoughtful trade-offs. Over time, cross-skilling spreads knowledge broadly across the team, reinforcing resilience and reducing the risk of single points of failure. In collective ownership, cross-skilling is not just a convenience but a necessity for ensuring that accountability for outcomes can truly be shared. Definition of done agreements encode the standards that everyone upholds before work is considered complete. These agreements extend beyond functional delivery to include quality, security, and operability. For example, a definition of done might specify that all code must be peer-reviewed, tested, documented, and monitored before release. Such agreements make expectations explicit and universal, ensuring that shared ownership is not undermined by uneven practices. They prevent situations where one team member considers work finished, while others discover gaps later. A clear definition of done aligns contributors to common standards and builds confidence in the reliability of outcomes. It also reinforces accountability, as each person knows they are responsible not only for their tasks, but for maintaining collective standards. By embedding these agreements into daily work, teams transform abstract commitments into consistent practices that sustain quality and trust. Coding and artifact standards further enable safe collective ownership. When standards for readability, testability, and traceability are established, any team member can confidently modify or improve shared assets. For example, consistent naming conventions, clear documentation, and reliable testing frameworks allow others to understand and work with code they did not originally write. Standards reduce friction when multiple people contribute to the same artifact, preventing errors that might arise from inconsistent approaches. They also ensure continuity, as shared assets remain maintainable even as team membership changes. These practices embody the principle that no artifact belongs to a single individual. Everything is owned collectively. By institutionalizing standards, teams create a foundation where collaboration can scale without eroding quality. This consistency is essential for trust, enabling the team to act as a cohesive unit in maintaining and improving the product. Pairing and mobbing practices transform work from isolated effort into collective engagement. In pairing, two people collaborate closely on a task, alternating roles to ensure both contribute. In mobbing, the whole team works together on the same problem, rotating control to share responsibility. These practices spread context widely, reducing silos and increasing the quality of work. For example, pair programming not only produces cleaner code, but also teaches participants new techniques and perspectives. Mobbing can tackle particularly difficult changes, ensuring that the entire team shares ownership of the solution. These practices normalize shared stewardship, reducing the tendency for individuals to hoard knowledge or territory. They also accelerate tacit knowledge transfer, as team members absorb approaches from one another in real time. Pairing and mobbing embody the spirit of collective ownership, turning delivery into a genuinely shared activity. On-call and operability rotations extend collective ownership into production environments. When responsibility for running systems is shared across the team, design decisions naturally account for operability and reliability. For example, developers who know they may be on call will prioritize clear logging, monitoring, and resilience in their code. Rotations distribute the burden of operational responsibility fairly, preventing burnout and building empathy. They also ensure continuity, as multiple people gain experience in handling real-world incidents. This alignment of development and operations reinforces the idea that ownership does not end at release, but extends to the user experience in production. By rotating responsibility, teams connect design choices directly to their consequences, building a culture of accountability and care that strengthens both trust and quality. Operability becomes a shared commitment, not an afterthought. Transparent decision logs connect collective ownership with accountability. By documenting the rationale behind choices, teams ensure that decisions can be revisited together without blame. For example, if a design path later proves problematic, the team can review the log to understand what information was available at the time. This shifts the conversation from "who made the mistake" to "what did we learn?" Decision logs reduce memory battles and clarify intent, strengthening trust. They also make adaptation easier since the team can see when assumptions have changed and pivot collectively. Transparency in decision-making reinforces that ownership is not about individual credit or fault, but about shared responsibility for outcomes. Over time, this practice builds resilience as teams learn to navigate uncertainty together with honesty and humility. Decision logs make shared accountability visible and durable. Work-in-process policies and swarming focus the team's energy on finishing the most valuable items rather than scattering effort. By limiting how many tasks are in progress at once, teams reduce the risk of partially done work aging into waste. Swarming takes this further by concentrating collective effort on unblocking or finishing critical items. For example, if a high-value feature is stuck, the team may pause other work to swarm on resolving dependencies and completing it. These practices reinforce collective ownership by shifting attention from individual productivity to team outcomes. They also reduce risk, as items are completed more quickly and issues surface earlier. Over time, WIP limits and swarming create flow stability and predictability, ensuring that progress reflects shared priorities. These practices demonstrate that collective ownership is not just about shared accountability, but also about aligning effort for maximum impact. Interface and contract clarity protects collective ownership by preventing hidden coupling. Teams document expectations among internal services and with external partners, making integration points explicit. Without this clarity, changes can break downstream systems unexpectedly, leading to mistrust and blame. For example, an API contract that specifies input, output, and error handling ensures that multiple teams can collaborate safely. Documented interfaces also accelerate onboarding, as newcomers can understand dependencies without relying on tribal knowledge. Clarity in contracts reinforces collective accountability because everyone understands the boundaries and responsibilities involved. It prevents local optimizations that harm integration and ensures that ownership extends across system edges. This transparency strengthens collaboration, making collective ownership viable even in complex, interdependent environments. A blameless incident culture is crucial for sustaining trust under pressure. When failures occur, the team treats them as shared system problems rather than individual shortcomings. For example, instead of blaming a developer for missing a check, the team examines why the process allowed the issue to pass unnoticed. This culture accelerates fixes, as people are more willing to surface errors when they know they will not be scapegoated. It also promotes learning, since the focus shifts to improving systems rather than punishing individuals. Blamelessness does not mean avoiding accountability. It means accountability is shared and constructive. By embedding this approach, teams strengthen resilience, reduce fear, and make transparency a natural response to setbacks. Blameless incident culture reinforces the principle that collective ownership includes both success and failure, ensuring that responsibility is truly shared. Access and permissions models must balance least privilege with collective progress. Teams need safeguards against unauthorized actions, but they also require shared ability to move work forward. Overly restrictive models create gatekeeping, where progress stalls because only a few people have access. By contrast, well-designed models distribute responsibility safely, ensuring that the team as a whole can deliver without dependency on specific individuals. For example, rotating administrative permissions with audit trails allows multiple team members to perform necessary tasks while maintaining accountability. This balance supports collective ownership by empowering everyone to contribute while protecting against misuse. It reinforces that ownership belongs to the team, not to a select group of gatekeepers. Access models aligned with collective ownership reduce bottlenecks and promote fairness, ensuring that progress reflects shared responsibility rather than individual privilege. Anti-patterns that undermine collective ownership must be identified and replaced. Local heroics, turf protection, and private cues all fracture shared responsibility. A hero culture creates dependencies on a few individuals, reducing resilience. Turf protection leads to silos where collaboration is resisted. Private cues conceal work from the team, eroding transparency and alignment. These patterns threaten collective outcomes by prioritizing individual recognition over team success. Replacing them requires deliberate facilitation and leadership modeling. For instance, shifting language from "my code" to "our system" reinforces collective norms. Celebrating cross-help and team achievements discourages heroism and siloed behavior. By confronting anti-patterns directly, teams protect the culture of shared accountability. Over time, collaborative norms replace fragmented habits, embedding collective ownership as the default. This vigilance ensures that shared responsibility is not aspirational, but practical and enduring. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are other prepcasts on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. A common backlog and prioritization process is one of the clearest ways to embody collective ownership. When all work is visible in a single backlog, the team sees priorities together, reducing confusion and private agendas. Rank ordering items ensures that energy flows toward the most valuable next slice, not scattered across competing interests. For example, rather than developers focusing on features while testers chase separate initiatives, a common backlog aligns everyone on the same highest value work. This practice eliminates fragmentation and reinforces shared responsibility for outcomes. Prioritization becomes a team activity, with trade-offs made transparently so no one feels sidelined or misinformed. Over time, this creates predictability and trust, as stakeholders know the team is united behind the same goals. A common backlog makes ownership collective not just in words, but in the visible, daily organization of work. Swarm policies further demonstrate the shift from individual tasks to team outcomes. Swarming occurs when the team collectively pivots to unblock or complete critical items, even if it requires stepping outside usual roles. These policies clarify when and how to swarm, ensuring that focus shifts are intentional and purposeful. For example, if a release is blocked by a stubborn integration issue, the whole team may swarm on solving it, sacrificing short-term specialization for faster, safer delivery. Swarming reduces the age of high-value items and prevents bottlenecks from dragging down progress. It also reinforces resilience, as team members learn together and broaden their skill sets. By embedding swarm policies into their norms, teams reduce wasteful multitasking and emphasize finishing over starting. This alignment ensures that collective ownership is visible in action, as energy is redirected toward the outcomes that matter most at the moment. Review practices distribute responsibility for quality across the team. Code reviews, test reviews, and design reviews bring multiple perspectives to each piece of work, catching defects early and reinforcing standards. These practices are not simply about error detection but about spreading knowledge and building shared confidence in the system. For example, when several team members review a design, they align on patterns, understand trade-offs, and ensure that no single person becomes a hidden bottleneck. Reviews also create teaching moments, allowing less experienced members to learn from experts while contributing their own observations. By embedding review as a normal part of delivery, teams ensure that no artifact belongs to one person alone. This shared stewardship strengthens both quality and resilience, reinforcing the cultural expectation that ownership of outcomes is distributed, not concentrated in isolated contributors. Early integration cadence is another practice that makes collective ownership practical. By assembling working systems frequently, teams reveal cross-cutting issues that no individual contributor could see in isolation. For example, integrating software components daily exposes interface mismatches before they accumulate into large failures. This rhythm reduces the risk of last-minute crises as incompatibilities are identified when they are still easy to fix. Early integration also builds confidence, as the team sees the system functioning as a whole rather than as disconnected parts. It reinforces the principle that progress is measured by integrated value, not by local completion of tasks. This cadence encourages collaboration across roles and disciplines, normalizing the habit of working together rather than apart. Over time, frequent integration strengthens trust, accelerates learning, and makes collective ownership tangible in the form of reliable end-to-end systems. Operational readiness checklists ensure that shared ownership extends beyond development into production. These checklists verify monitoring, alerts, documentation, and rollback paths as part of the definition of done. For example, before releasing a feature, the team confirms that it has appropriate logs, dashboards, and a clear rollback plan. This practice prevents gaps where functionality is shipped without being truly ready for real-world use. By embedding operational concerns into readiness, teams reinforce that ownership does not end at release but continues through operability. Checklists also reduce ambiguity, providing explicit standards that everyone understands and upholds. They encourage a culture where reliability is a shared duty, not just the responsibility of operations specialists. Operational readiness thus links design choices with production realities, aligning accountability across the full life cycle. It transforms ownership from an abstract principle into a concrete set of shared practices. Metrics alignment prevents incentives from undermining collective ownership. When measures focus on individual velocity or output counts, people optimize locally at the expense of system outcomes. Instead, metrics must reflect shared goals, such as outcome attainment, flow stability, and escaped defects. For example, tracking how quickly the team delivers usable increments and how few defects reach production aligns effort with end-to-end value. Flow stability measures whether delivery is predictable and sustainable, not just fast. Escaped defects reveal how well quality is upheld collectively. These measures reward collaboration and discourage behaviors that fragment ownership. Aligning metrics around outcomes ensures that incentives reinforce, rather than contradict, collective responsibility. Over time, such metrics build trust, as stakeholders see that progress reflects real value. By designing metrics carefully, teams create cultural and operational alignment that sustains shared accountability. Escalation and decision protocols bring clarity to collective ownership when cross-cutting risks or conflicts arise. Shared accountability does not mean decisions happen by consensus. Every time ambiguity here can stall progress. Clear protocols specify who resolves which issues and how. For example, technical design conflicts might be escalated to a designated architecture steward, while prioritization disputes are resolved by the product owner with input from the team. Protocols keep speed high while preserving accountability, ensuring that decisions are timely and transparent. This structure prevents ownership from devolving into paralysis, where everyone waits for alignment. Instead, it clarifies how collective responsibility translates into action. Protocols also reduce mistrust because everyone knows how decisions are made and who is accountable. In this way, escalation and decision practices strengthen ownership by combining inclusivity with clarity. Vendor and partner alignment extends collective ownership beyond organizational walls. Many teams depend on external interfaces, vendors, or partners, and without shared practices, misalignment can fracture outcomes. Joint demos, shared service-level objectives, and integration playbooks bring partners into the same accountability framework as internal teams. For example, a vendor delivering an API participates in the same system demos, ensuring visibility and confidence. Service-level agreements are treated as living commitments, aligned with team goals rather than static documents. Integration playbooks clarify expectations, reducing surprises. By embedding external stakeholders into collective practices, teams prevent finger-pointing and delays. Instead, outcomes are co-owned, and collaboration is strengthened. Extending collective ownership across boundaries requires effort, but it builds resilience and consistency across the delivery ecosystem. Compliance by design integrates regulatory and audit requirements into normal work, preventing fractures in ownership. Instead of scrambling to produce evidence after the fact, teams embed traceability and approvals into daily practices. For example, backlog items may link directly to compliance requirements, with acceptance criteria capturing necessary evidence. This makes compliance a shared responsibility rather than a last-minute handoff to specialists. Compliance by design also reinforces transparency, as records are maintained continuously rather than reconstructed. This integration reduces stress, accelerates audits, and ensures that ownership of compliance is distributed across the team. By embedding compliance into everyday work, teams maintain agility while upholding accountability, proving that collective ownership is compatible with regulatory rigor. Knowledge repositories preserve ownership across time and personnel changes. Without them, context evaporates when individuals leave or teams reconfigure. By capturing decisions, rationales, and artifacts in searchable systems, teams ensure that ownership remains collective, even as membership shifts. For example, a repository of design choices and lessons learned allows new members to contribute confidently without rediscovering past knowledge. Repositories reduce reliance on memory and prevent private knowledge silos from forming. They also strengthen continuity, as collective ownership is reinforced by accessible context. This practice ensures that shared accountability is not dependent on stable team composition, but is embedded in the organization's memory. Over time, knowledge repositories create a culture where learning and stewardship are durable, reinforcing the principle that outcomes are owned by the team, not by individuals. Remote-friendly ownership ensures that distributed team members participate fully in collective responsibility. Practices such as written context, shared artifacts, and asynchronous reviews make ownership accessible regardless of geography. For example, documenting backlog priorities in a shared tool ensures that all members see the same information, while asynchronous code reviews allow input from people in different time zones. These practices prevent exclusion, where remote members might otherwise be sidelined. Remote-friendly ownership reinforces that accountability and contribution are universal, not limited by proximity. It also strengthens resilience, as distributed teams learn to coordinate transparently across distance. By embedding inclusivity into ownership practices, teams maintain cohesion and ensure that collective responsibility spans the full breadth of the team. Recognition practices celebrate behaviors that reinforce shared responsibility. Instead of rewarding only individual achievements, leaders highlight team accomplishments, cross-help, and debugging wins where collaboration solved difficult problems. For example, celebrating a team that collectively resolved a critical outage emphasizes that shared resilience is valued. Recognition of these behaviors signals that collaboration is as important as technical output. By aligning praise with collective success, organizations reinforce the norms that sustain shared ownership. Recognition does not eliminate individual acknowledgement, but ensures that team-first contributions are honored. Over time, this shapes culture, motivating people to prioritize collective outcomes over personal credit. Recognition makes visible the value of shared responsibility, embedding it in the everyday rhythm of the team. Anti-pattern remediation prevents language and behaviors from undermining collective ownership. Phrases like "my code" or "my ticket" reinforce individual silos and weaken accountability for outcomes. By contrast, outcome language, such as "our feature" or "our release," reinforces shared stewardship. Leaders model and encourage this language, gently correcting individualistic habits. Remediation also addresses deeper issues such as private queues or turf wars by facilitating collaboration and demonstrating alternatives. For example, replacing hidden work with a transparent backlog eliminates private ownership and reinforces collective accountability. By actively correcting anti-patterns, teams ensure that culture reflects values consistently. These small but deliberate shifts build cohesion, ensuring that ownership is not aspirational but embedded in practice. Sustainability checks protect teams from burnout while practicing collective ownership. Shared responsibility must be balanced fairly, with attention to load distribution, on-call fairness, and time for learning. Without this, ownership risks becoming diffuse accountability, where everyone feels pressure but no one feels supported. Sustainability checks examine whether responsibility is equitably shared and whether collective practices are draining energy. For example, rotating on-call duties ensures fairness, while reserving capacity for skill growth prevents stagnation. Leaders also monitor team well-being, ensuring that ownership strengthens engagement rather than eroding it. By keeping ownership sustainable, organizations ensure that it remains a source of resilience rather than exhaustion. Sustainability closes the loop, ensuring that collective ownership is not just effective in the short term but durable over time. Collective ownership synthesis emphasizes that dependable value emerges when teams share goals, standards, and responsibility. Practices such as common backlogs, swarming, and early integration make shared accountability practical, while standards and checklists embed quality into daily work. Recognition, anti-pattern remediation, and sustainability checks reinforce cultural alignment, ensuring that ownership remains authentic and healthy. Metrics, protocols, and compliance integration provide structure without undermining collaboration. Together, these practices transform groups of individuals into cohesive, resilient teams capable of delivering reliable end-to-end outcomes. Collective ownership is not simply about working together. It is about designing systems where responsibility, trust, and credit are distributed, ensuring that delivery is dependable, adaptive, and shared. Thanks for tuning in to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, your trusted source for cybersecurity news and insights. Remember to subscribe at baremetalcyber.com so you never miss an update. And visit cyberauthor.me for best-selling cybersecurity books that equip you with expert knowledge. Until next time, stay secure and stay vigilant.